Hello and welcome back to part 2 of the Realising the Ambition overview session. In part 1 we covered sections 1 to 3 of Realising the Ambition, and in the next section we begin with section 4. And section 4 is focused on play, the importance of play, child's work. And my goodness, play, such a contested word. What does it mean and why is it so hotly debated? In this section, play as a concept is explored. Realising the Ambition acknowledges that the concept is complex and it's all too often misunderstood, and so the guidance strives to provide clarity of message. To highlight the value of play from the baby's earliest days and on into early childhood, and beyond into adulthood, why not? Play is an intrinsic part of human nature and development, but play is not simple. Play can be and mean many different things to children and adults. A challenge for us is to go beyond the word play and consider how play and learning are associated. And if you look at this quote, that was written over 200 years ago. This is not a new thing to explore or consider. Through play, the child can learn to answer their own questions, learn new skills, and learn to work collaboratively with other children and adults. Curriculum for Excellence gives prominence to play, particularly across early level and the transition between early learning and childcare and into primary school. Further information can be found in the Early Level Play Pedagogy Toolkit available on the National Improvement Hub. We would urge you to explore this resource. The Play Toolkit is relatively new, but it's expanding all the time to respond to the ever-growing interest in play. High quality play, what it can and should look like. We also have more information available on something called a Wakelet, which is a collection of links. And if you look at or Google the @CAF Team Wakelet, you will find a host of resources to help and support you. Now, our next slide looks at interactions, experiences, and spaces. Throughout the guidance, the term the learning environment is defined as the totality of these three parts: the interactions we have, the experiences we facilitate, and the spaces that we make for children as educators. Every learning environment, in terms of these interactions, experiences, and spaces, tell a story about how play is valued. Now, we carefully designed sketches throughout the guidance to offer practical help in articulating processes. And Liz and Marion will tell you we deliberated over this sketch in particular, and it's become so important we actually include it in Realising the Ambition twice. Here we explore what child-centred pedagogy can look like in practice. We speak of the role of the adult and the vital interplay of being both intentional and responsive in practice. We invite practitioners to see observations as central to the understanding of where learners are and informing what happens next. We ask you to listen with your eyes and ears. These themes and ideas have been explored in more depth via the Early Learning Play Pedagogy Toolkit. Now I'm going to hand you back over to Liz.
As we said before, the guidance uses photographs, drawings and stories from children to bring them actively into the document and to articulate best practice. We would like you to note the progression in children's mark making from scribbling stage on page 12, then adding some details like fingernails on the baby sister's drawing on page 20, and on page 114, see how the child's drawing communicates meaning and is integral to literacy development. I think it's amazing how this wee one has managed to convey within her drawing exactly what she was saying there, which was so carefully scribed by their adult. I have my hat and jumper on. I drew numbers because I'm counting. And look, the sun is shining down. Over to you, Marion.
In the next part of the presentation, we will consider the remaining sections of Realising the Ambition. And here we're looking at section 5, first of all, early childhood curriculum and pedagogical leadership. The first bullet point asks, what is the early childhood curriculum? It is holistic, it values children, it recognises their capacities and capabilities from birth. And in Scotland, we have a socially constructed curriculum where the child and their environment interact to create meaning. The early childhood curriculum is not fixed. It is flexible and responsive to the motivations and the interests of the child in the environment that they inhabit. We can learn so much about what the child's curriculum should be just by being reflexive to their curiosities and creative minds. Our role is to be in tune with the rhythms of the child and support their learning wherever that takes place. The early childhood curriculum has from the outset been about the child at the centre, and this thinking sits neatly with Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory. Realising the ambition gives us stronger steer, direction, permission to be creative in our pedagogy, to be unique in what we do with and for our children. To be clear, realising the ambition is about much more than play or pedagogy or a set of aspects relating to children's learning. Realising the ambition sets out a philosophy for early years and for early years educators. It is underpinned by research, by what we know about brain development, child development, and yes, it makes strong connections with areas of curriculum for excellence, such as respect, working with families, and the importance of relationships. But we need to be clear. Realising the ambition is national guidance for early years in Scotland. It is not curriculum for excellence. And linking it to the E's and O's as some kind of planning or assessment tool or tick box monitoring sheet was not ever intended or indeed advised. The philosophy within Realising the Ambition empowers you to be responsive and intentional in your planning, to reflect on your practice so that you can facilitate the right kind of interactions, to learn from the child as you consider future experiences in spaces that are culturally relevant. We all have a responsibility for designing and implementing a connected, culturally responsive curriculum. In section 6, Putting Pedagogy into Practice sets out these points in more detail, and I would encourage you to visit the narrative in section 6. And on page 64, you'll find a really useful sketch note. This bullet point, what do we mean by pedagogy and pedagogical leadership? Well, if we look at the work of Judith Sullivan, she says we are all leaders of learning in our various roles, but do we fully grasp what needs to be done as pedagogical leaders? On this slide, we ask the question again, what is the early childhood curriculum? We ask, what lens do you see your curriculum through? Do you see it through developmental milestones? Is it reflexive to need? Is it a relational curriculum? And does it reflect the social and cultural context of your setting? Is it child-centred? Is it more a how and a what? And in all of this, we're looking for a collaboration so that we have a curriculum that meets the needs of your children in your setting. So in the current landscape, the rationale and content of your early child curriculum may of necessity need some closer consideration. A word of caution though here from our analysis of our shared inspection findings for the QI 2.2 in the year 2018-19, we saw some instances that too much time was spent in creating the rationale to the detriment of actually enacting the curriculum. We do know from research of the buffering effects of a high quality early learning and child experience on children who are affected by a poverty of relationships. Adopting through collaboration a socially constructed curriculum that recognises the cultural context of the child and family will most likely be more relevant and empowering. And now I'm going to hand back to Liz.
So, moving on to section 6, putting pedagogy into practice. In section 4, on page 47, the guidance defines pedagogy, and it says, and I quote, "Pedagogy is a word that is in everyday use now, but do we all have a clear and shared understanding of what it really means? And how do we use that understanding to implement play approaches in our settings?" Stewart and Pugh define pedagogy as the understanding of how children learn and develop, and the practices through which we can enhance that process. This definition is rooted in the values and beliefs about what we want for children, supported by knowledge of the child, backed up by what we know about early childhood development and our experience as practitioners. So in section 6, the guidance takes this concept a little further and invites the reader to engage with and how to put pedagogy into practice. Section 6 discusses how to provide meaningful learning environments, spaces filled with well-judged interactions, and meaningful experiences that start from the children themselves. And Julie Fisher stresses that starting with the child should not be an empty mantra. Starting with the child, with what the child already knows, and then building on their funds of knowledge is the most important thing. Too often children find themselves facing uninspiring activities that requires them to revisit knowledge and skills that they have already mastered. Deep level learning that motivates and extends their problem solving and creative thinking will reap greater rewards for all. As we have said previously, it is key to think about the learning environment in terms of interactions and experiences and spaces we facilitate. To understand child-centred pedagogy, we must consider planning and facilitating as a cyclical process which starts with the child. We need to discover how we can confidently reconcile showing responsiveness, yet have also intentionality when planning for children's learning. A key consideration when planning responsively and intentionally is the effectiveness of the observations made by the practitioner or the teacher, knowing what to look for and how and what to record. We talk about documentation that is meaningful, relevant, and leads to improved outcomes for children. But how can we do this in practice? Observations are key to getting to know the baby, the toddler, and the young child. This then informs the actions that we will take next to facilitate future learning. The section powerfully and intentionally adopts the voice of the child, setting out what they need from us to sensitively and progressively promote their literacy, numeracy, and mathematical thinking. The guidance reiterates the role of the environment, or spaces, of nurturing relationships and well-considered interactions. Over to you, Lynn.
Thanks, Liz. Section 7, ensuring high quality through critically reflective practice. This section lays out not only the features of high quality provision, but the why. High quality is essential. Research has shown that high quality early years provision promotes children's development and learning and, in the longer term, enhances their educational and life chances. However, poor quality services can have a detrimental effect on children's development. One of the 4 pillars of the expansion of early learning and childcare across Scotland is quality. The existence of high quality experiences for all children is expected not only to be sustained but improved as the ELC sector undergoes that transformational change. The emphasis on critically reflective practice is designed to promote the use of self and peer evaluation of current practice and provision. References to quality frameworks such as How Good is Our Early Learning in Childcare are provided as reminders of the need for consistency of experience. Children and families should expect to receive the very best from the setting their child attends. Quality environments, interactions and experiences in spaces that are responsive and reflexive to the needs of all. Where this is the case, a culture of critically reflective practice exists, leadership is strong and built on mutually agreed priorities and a vision for the future. Exploring the golden thread of quality, in the sketch on page 87, you can see the elements that combine to realise the very best practice, built on a shared vision, one that is understood and permeates all aspects of the life and work of the setting. The sketch is designed to be a talking point for teams of practitioners, teachers or others to reflect on what they know, how they know it and how well they are doing, to identify where they need to take action and what they need to do to achieve excellence and equity.
Section 8. Transitions matter to me. In the current climate, more than ever, we need to think about the effectiveness of our transitions approaches. Our children and families in our workforce are living through the most challenging times. Section 8 was clearly written well before the current pandemic swept aside all the norms, systems and routines which we recognise as part of everyday life. The guidance, however, provides signposts to features of positive practice. And also, you can find some advice on the hub on transitions. The OECD quote on page 91 is timely because significant consideration now needs to be given to children's attachment, adjustment, attunement and executive function. We will require to work closely with families and communities and education and care professionals in the coming weeks and months to get this right, emotionally, socially, cognitively, for every child. OECD quote that I referred to says the transition to school together with the transition from home to an EC setting are the first occasions in which children experience a big cultural change in the people around them, the ways in which they interact, their number of peers, the types of activity they engage in, and their physical surroundings. In this slide, we look at vertical and horizontal transitions. This diagram can be found on page 90, and it illustrates the differences between horizontal and vertical transitions. As suggested in the previous slide, children experience throughout their lives multiple transitions. And the same is true for adults. Research literature on the subject of transition is vast. It has been the focus of many national and international studies. And the key features described in pages 93 to 95 are drawn from these studies and from best practice. They're not considered an exhaustive list set of features, and they may well apply in and across the sectors, settings and situations. So, vertical transitions are considered a major change for children and their families, such as starting at ELC or primary school or the childminder. Horizontal transitions, on the other hand, are the multiple transitions that happen throughout the day, such as moving from home into a setting and moving from periods of play to meal times, or even going home. It illustrates the 5 C's which emerged from a small-scale qualitative study that explored the transitions experiences of a group of children in their year before starting school. The 5 C's are seen as important in contributing to and securing a positive transition. And as we cast our eye beyond the here and now, transition arrangements of necessity will require us to consider the culture that our children will encounter when schools and settings fully reopen to the ways that we can remember. Attention will need to be given to the kinds of communication we have with our parents and communities, and this will involve new and innovative collaborations with colleagues in and across authorities, agencies and third sector organisations. Ideally, we would achieve consistency in our child-centred approaches, for a positive transition. Let me hand over to Liz.
This next slide talks about a wakelet, and we've already mentioned previously in our session today about the wakelets being available, and I would like to draw your attention to this one about supporting young children at points of transition. It's available on our National Improvement Hub, and we think that this may help you consider what you need to do for transitions in your setting moving further on in the weeks and months ahead. So, over to me again to say it's time for you to do a wee bit of work too. We would like you to consider in your group to reflect and discuss the challenges, barriers, successes of facilitating transition so far within this current situation. So what extent has COVID-19 impacted on children's transitions experiences? It's a good point to discuss what it is you've seen, heard, would like to do. So just take a wee bit of time now to share with each other some of your practice, some things that you've maybe heard about, and how you have supported children to connect and reconnect with settings and schools.
Thank you, Liz. Now we'll look at section 9, what we can learn from other curriculum approaches. This is a totally new section that looks outwards. By casting our eye beyond our own curriculum model, we can be reassured that others share our values and beliefs about how babies and young children learn best. By deepening our understanding of other curriculum approaches, we can innovate within our own curriculum context, and we can weave new threads of knowledge into our curriculum to ensure we provide what children need from us in terms of high quality early childhood experiences. Each of the subsections in this section offers a brief insight into 4 of the better known world curriculums or pedagogical approaches. Further reading and challenge questions can be found in this section. The ELC sector has seen a significant interest in the work of Froebel, with many education authorities and the private sector investing in accredited training opportunities for practitioners and teachers through distance learning at Glasgow and Edinburgh University. The positive impact of these opportunities are evidenced in improvements in the quality of the interactions, environments and relationships. Back to you, Liz.
So, final section, section 10, conclusions. Realising ambition, being me, I hope you understand now, aspires to support all working with and for the babies and young children of Scotland. It deliberately invites you to hear the child's voice. The existence of the child's voice throughout the guidance helps us all to be mindful of who matters the most and what they need from us to develop, to learn, and to experience success in their young lives. It raises the bar from the original building the ambition to widen the scope within the guidance. It provides a repository of information and good practice for everyone working within the ELC sector, the early stages of primary school and beyond. This collective investment in seeking to improve children's futures brings responsibilities for us all. This overview presentation was designed to give you a brief look at the national practice document. We do hope that it has been useful and has successfully whetted your appetite to know more. I would like to take a moment just to say thank you to Marion and Lynn for joining me in this presentation today, but with the intention of, please, if you feel that you wish to contact us with any questions related to realising the ambition, we will endeavour to provide a response. So finally, being me. My and your role is about creating this emotional space for learning. And we really liked this final quote: "Young children learn from those they trust and with those who foster an enthusiasm for learning." Thank you for listening to us today.